In today's video, we have the latest NHL trade talks surrounding teams like the Anaheim Ducks, New York Islanders, and the Boston Bruins. We also have news on Red Wings top prospect Moritz Seider, and we have the latest updates on the NHL's return to play for the 2021 NHL season. It's not all good news either. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to discuss here today. Let's kick things off with the news that the Detroit Red Wings will not be sending top prospect and one of their top defensive players in the system here, Moritz Seider, German-born player, to the World Junior Championships. Now, he's playing right now in Sweden, but he was not on Germany's roster as they head into their training camps to prepare for the World Junior Championships that'll take place next month in Alberta. So the reasoning for that, from what I can gather, is that obviously if he's at the World Junior Championships, he would miss the beginning of NHL training camps, assuming that they get the season prepared to start in January. Training camps would start sometime middle to late December, and obviously he would still be tied up with that until the new year. So it seems like they want him to stay in Sweden, continue playing there, and then come over to the NHL training camp once they start. So I would guess that they probably see him as being a pretty good bet to make their NHL roster this year, and they want him there from the beginning. It'd be what it sounds like to me. So I guess we'll see. Well, maybe there could be a late addition there to the Germany roster. It's unfortunate. I was really looking forward to seeing him play for Germany. They have a lot of great prospects, many of which that were taken in the 2020 draft, including like Stützle and Peterka and Reichel and etc. But, obviously, Moritz Seider will not be part of that tournament as of right now. So we'll see if he can make the NHL and have an impact on the Red Wings this season. Now, in NHL trade rumor news today, we have three teams we're focusing on. I'm going to kick things off with the Anaheim Ducks. Now, as we stand right now, the Anaheim Ducks are technically not cap compliant. They're over the salary cap by about $1 million, but at this point, GM Bob Murray doesn't really need to panic. There are some options to become cap compliant that don't necessarily involve the team making any moves, but at the same time, a team like the Ducks, who are kind of going through a bit of a rebuild or a retool or whatever you want to call it, certainly are in a situation where they probably don't want to be right up against the cap heading into the season. So the fact that they're over right now means that they do need to do something. Now, they could do something as simple as putting Ryan Getzlaf's contract on long-term injury reserve. But of course, the LTIR usage and how they go about doing it certainly impacts their overall cap availability and what they can use down the road later into the season and all that. So clearly that is an option. They have that in their back pocket if they absolutely have to, because we know Ryan Getzlaf is pretty much guaranteed to not play again. He's got 2 years left on his contract, just shy of $6 million. So it's a pretty big tool for them to become cap compliant if need be. But there's been talk that they had exploratory talks around trading captain Ryan Getzlaf. Now, doesn't mean that they're out actively looking to trade Getzlaf. I'm not suggesting that. But the rumor has it that teams have been calling to see what it would take to get him onto their team. Of course, he's been in the NHL a long time, a solid veteran guy. He's got a Stanley Cup to his name, a lot of success internationally with Team Canada. Had a really solid NHL career. He's making over $8 million, which is probably a problem for a lot of teams to take him on. But if the Anaheim Ducks were willing to consider eating some of that salary, as much as 50% can be retained, if for a team to get him at anywhere between $4.5–5 million cap hit for a guy like Getzlaf, who's still relatively productive and still good down the middle, good on faceoffs and all that, like that would be a pretty solid deal. The Ducks could get some solid future assets to continue the rebuild, and maybe they decide to do that. But one thing that complicates things is that Getzlaf does have that full no-move clause, so he cannot be traded without his permission. So clearly that's going to play a big role, and it's not really known if Getzlaf was really kind of, set on remaining in Anaheim and finishing his career there. He will be a free agent after this year. He's got 1 year left. So is he in the Ducks' plans beyond the current season? It's difficult to say. Some feel that Getzlaf likely would re-sign with the Ducks, but obviously at a lower cap hit. Remain there, remain their captain, and kind of be a good leader and mentor for a lot of the younger players that are coming through the system as he kind of rides out the rest of his remaining time in the NHL. But he's still a productive player. You know what? Some feel that maybe he'd rather go chase championships elsewhere, because the Ducks are likely going to be a little while before they're in that predicament to be able to seriously contend again. At least with a real legitimate chance for a little while, at least a few years, to be my expectations in that regard. So hard to say what happens with Getzlaf. They're clearly not going out of their way to shop him. They could make some other more simple moves to become cap compliant, like whether it's putting Kessler on long-term injury reserve or moving a less significant player. There has been some chatter around even a guy like Rickard Rakell as well, who's kind of getting to his later 20s, been up and down with his production. I still think Rakell could again be part of the solution there in Anaheim, along with a guy like Jacob Silfverberg. I can't see them moving him. They don't have a lot of players locked up too long. They have a couple defensemen like Fowler, Manson still with some decent term, Lindholm. So those are the kind of core pieces they're kind of building around with all these young guys, and it's just unclear right now if Getzlaf is a part of that long-term plan. Of course, we saw Perry get bought out last year and move on. Could the same fate happen to Getzlaf, but obviously not through buyout, but through trade. Teams are interested, and we'll see if any of them make an offer to the Ducks that intrigues Bob Murray to go talk to Getzlaf about the situation. But for right now, I'd say pretty good chance he stays because he controls his own fate, but difficult to say how long he will remain in Anaheim. Now, when it comes to the New York Islanders, they're certainly a team to keep your eye on. The Islanders and Tampa Bay are the two teams, in my opinion, at least, that have the biggest names in the RFA world that remain unsigned, and their cap situations pose a problem to getting those contracts officially on the books. Obviously, we know negotiations have taken place. How far along they are in the process, there hasn't been a lot of chatter around a guy like Matthew Barzal with the Islanders. Of course, Tampa has, Cirelli, Sergachev, and Chernak. But when it comes to Lou Lamoriello and the Islanders, they do a pretty good job on not leaking a whole lot of information. You don't get a lot of talk about the trade rumors like you do a lot of the other teams because they do run a pretty tight ship there. But obviously, it seems like from what I've seen and heard online that the Islanders are not anywhere near panicking right now. They're taking their time. They have some deals that are rumored to be in the works. They tried moving Johnny Boychuk. They tried moving Nick Leddy. And there just really does not seem to be hardly any interest around the NHL due to their contracts more than anything. If they're making a lot less money and needed to be moved, I think teams would be more willing to take that risk on with them. But at their ages and where they're at with their production and the contracts, it just doesn't fit in a lot of places. The Islanders would have to be willing to eat a fair bit of salary on those. And then that means that they're not going to get enough bang for their buck for getting the cap relief they need to get Barzal signed. Now, clearly when it comes to Barzal, many felt that he would entertain an offer sheet, and maybe he still would, but there's very few teams in the situation who could do it. So obviously, I think it's pretty unlikely. I'd have to say that the odds of it happening are very slim at this point. I'd be quite surprised. And there's been talk at one point that he was looking for $9 to $10 million in a long-term deal. Clearly, things have changed a lot with the shutdown and COVID and all that stuff that we're dealing with. So that's a different scenario. Now some are saying that it could be like maybe a 3-year deal around the $7 million, $7.5 million range. Might be something that's reasonable for Barzal based on his recent production throughout his entry-level contract. So clearly they are lacking the space to do that, and they need probably at least $5 million, maybe 5 to 6 in that range, kind of go out the door to have a real shot at getting him signed and becoming cap compliant for the upcoming season. And the name that's been out there now that I've seen on multiple sites reporting that there's some chatter around is Josh Bailey. Now, Bailey's a player who has a decent amount of term. He's still relatively productive, making $5 million. There could be interest on some other rebuilding teams. Like, he's a good veteran guy. A team like Detroit, for example. The Red Wings are a team that Yzerman's even said that they're not necessarily completely done. That's once they have a better idea when training camps are going to be, when the season will start, that he could see them possibly taking on another veteran guy, basically to take advantage of the teams that have the cap issue. So whether it be a guy like Bailey or a team, a player from the Lightning or Vegas or one of those other teams that really need to shed salary, Detroit's still in a position where they can take one more of those players on and take advantage of that. Now, they might prefer somebody with a little less term than Bailey, and it doesn't mean for sure he's going to be the guy that goes out the door. But the Islanders will need to make a move, and they're going to have to be somewhat substantial or significant. And right now, there's talk that Bailey could be the guy that they shop. But they do have time to get this sorted out, and all indications are that Lou Lamoriello and the Islanders are not panicking. They have several things that they're working on, and I guess we'll see how they go about this here, hopefully in the near future. Now, the other team we want to talk about here today as well is the Boston Bruins. Now, of course, we talked a lot about the possibilities of what they could be working on here as of late. We talked about a trade with Calgary, but their latest reports from Joe Haggerty of Boston Hockey Now indicate that if they don't do that kind of deal with Calgary, that another move that they're considering doing is having youngster Urho Vakanainen, and arguably their top defenseman prospect, who could be traded as well to try to make that blue line a little bit more experienced. Of course, they already lost Torrey Krug. They're in danger of losing Zdeno Chara. There's a lot of rumors that he may not be back. So you lose those two blue liners, that's a big hit to the Bruins. I mean, they still, if they don't make that trade with Calgary, they could still have a guy like McAvoy and Carlo and Grzelcyk, but they're all relatively young, and so there's talk that Vakanainen could be used as a trade piece to bring in a more experienced blue liner. So clearly there's teams out there with defensemen that has been rumored to be available. So there's a number of places they could look to for what kind of trade. So clearly Vakanainen is a guy that the Bruins apparently are dangling to get a more experienced blue liner back there. And if they're doing that, that tells me that they're really preparing for the strong possibility that Chara does not return. And if Chara does not return, either he doesn't play or he goes somewhere else. It just seemed really weird to have him not be on the Bruins next year. But obviously the Bruins are going to have probably a fairly different looking team here in the next short term. They've got, guys like Rask and Halak and even Krejci. They're all entering the final years of their deal. So we can start to see a little bit of turnover possibly in that core part of the team. And if Chara doesn't come back and Krug's gone, it could be a very looking different team in the not too distant future. So obviously with the Bruins, I'm not sure exactly who they'd be targeting. I mean, Hannafin's been the main name that's been out there so far, but we had heard about Hannafin that Carlo was a guy that might be moved. But I mean, it would make sense from Calgary's perspective. I don't see Calgary moving Hannafin for Vakanainen. They'd want something a little bit more established. So difficult to say. I would think that unless there's, like I said before, though, with that Hannafin Bruins rumor, I would not be surprised if it did happen that it would be multiple pieces on both sides, and it could turn out to be a larger, more significant trade for both sides. So let me know your thoughts on that as well. Now, before we jump into the update on the 2021 NHL season, a couple other quick notes I want to touch on here quickly. Just a couple of noteworthy items. The East Coast Hockey League, the ECHL, which is basically 2 steps down from the NHL, which is your second level of farm teams. You get the American Hockey League, then the East Coast League, which many NHL teams have a team affiliated in that league. They're going to have an entire division, the Northern Division, not take part in the upcoming season. So that's a big blow to a lot of players that suddenly become free agents, a lot of staff that are basically out of work. I mean, those guys don't make a ton of money to begin with. So they do it for the love of the game and for the opportunity they're trying to create themselves to hopefully get a shot at either the American Hockey League or the NHL down the road. So that's certainly not good news, as COVID cases around Canada and the U.S. have certainly been kind of exploding lately. And the second wave here, as we call it, through this pandemic has not been kind to North America as well as other places as well. But looking at the hockey leagues trying to operate here, it's been awfully tough. So the entire Northern Division, which does include like the Newfoundland Growlers, which are affiliated with the Leafs, the Belleville team, which is affiliated with the Senators, and several others that are in that division, the northern part here between Canada and the northern part of the U.S., are not going to be participating in the upcoming season. So their season essentially has been, unfortunately, canceled. So that's bad news. We'll see how these other leagues can make out and the rest of them in the NHL, which we'll touch on here momentarily. But we also had a pretty significant hire I want to touch on because it's significant from a couple of different perspectives here. The Florida Panthers have hired Brett Peterson as an assistant general manager, and Brett Peterson actually formerly worked as an agent for a long time. Same kind of background that their new GM Bill Zito has. But Brett Peterson will be the first black assistant general manager in the NHL. So it's significant to see more diversity. Of course, it wasn't all that long ago in the past week. We had baseball have their first female general manager, somebody who had been in the game a long time. I think she'd been around baseball about 30 years, working for an opportunity, well respected. But it's just nice to finally see, whether it be women or different cultures and different diverse groups here, get more opportunities at higher levels. It's a pretty significant barrier in sports to see somebody like that get that opportunity. So great news. Congratulations to Brett Peterson. I hope he does a great job with the Florida Panthers. Now on to the latest on the 2021 NHL season update. Now they're still grinding things out, trying to get an agreement in place to hopefully have a January 1st or early January start time. But there is a significant snag. As I mentioned yesterday, it's obviously still, we have a little bit more details to talk about today. But essentially the players have been asked to defer more money. Obviously another 13%. So they've already agreed to defer 10% before. Now they're asking for another 13%. So of course the new CBA that they came to an agreement on just 4 months ago, the owners are now going back to the players and asking for changes, which has not gone over well with the NHLPA. There seems to be significant pushback, and understandably so. I understand from the owner's perspective. Obviously they're a gate-driven business, so clearly they're not making money. So they don't want to have to pay out as much And I get that from a business perspective. But from the player's perspective, you're looking at it and saying, we just came to an agreement 4 months ago, and now you're asking to change it. So I understand from their perspective too. I just hope that they can find common ground, but it's not going to be easy. At the end of the day here, though, you know, really, if they don't play, it's bad for everybody. The players won't get paid anything, which is bad for them. You get the owners who won't make money, so like they need to find a way to find a resolution to this. There still seems to be a variety of formats, a number of games in the books here that are being considered. So like, you know, 60 games plus, I think it was around what we're hearing as the more likely scenario, but there's still several, you know, a number of games and schedules and that type of thing are being considered. So we're still aiming for January 1st, but time is of the essence. I need to get this hammered out quickly if there's going to be any hope for January 1st. If we even get past, you know, into next week, for example, we're likely looking at more likely a January 15th, and then if it drags on further, it could be worse. But the NHLPA and the NHL have a pretty significant issue here on what the players are going to be paid for the coming season, and it needs to be ironed out. Now, if you think about it, obviously, with what they would be deferring already, what they're going to be deferring, you know, if they agree to this 13%, plus what is going to be taken for escrow, that's a significant hit to their paychecks. And, if, you know, if they're down to like 60% is kind of what it would work out to with everything. But if they only play 60% of the schedule, some say, well, you're getting paid 60% of what you would have, but you're only playing 60% of the game, so it's fair. But, you know, I guess an agreement's an agreement. You're going back on it. I mean, at the same time, though, they didn't make that agreement thinking that there was going to be no fans in attendance to at least start the 2021 NHL season. So that is a big roadblock, and I just hope they can work together to overcome it. I can certainly see concerns on both sides of the coin here, and let's just hope that we'll have hockey and they can overcome this. But there was supposed to be a big meeting late this afternoon. I think it was 5 o'clock Eastern time. I was hoping to have some more information that came from that meeting when I was making this video. But as of the recording of this, at least, nothing has been additionally released that came from that meeting as of yet. There probably will be more information later this evening. Maybe the meeting's still going on. I'm not sure. I'm sure it's going to be lengthy with a lot of things to be discussed. So we'll see. I'll hopefully have more updates here in the near future. So that is all for today. Let me know your thoughts on something discussed down in the comments section, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.